My name is Ginny, also known as 2/3 Lotus, everywhere on the internet. This clip is part of my series, The Poets of Twitch, where I analyze my viewers' writing live on stream. Nothing has been edited out, so you're seeing this exactly as streamed with all of the imperfections and tangents that come with being live. If you want to catch me live or want more information, check out the description. Otherwise, enjoy some excellent writing. I wrote another poem if you'd like to read that. Yeah, send it. Absolutely, drowningdevil12. I would be happy to be graced by your poetry another time. So let's do it. Your review made me more confident. That makes me so happy to hear. I'm glad. I've enjoyed this. Glad. Their chart games rated you. It's after midnight here and I'm off to bed. Yes. Absolutely. Anyone who's been on Twitch watching for a long time or needs to take care of yourself, get some sleep. That is way more important to me than you watching my stream. Take care of yourselves. Very, very important thing to be doing, right? So, just waiting at the moment for the submission. Okay, we have Drowning Devil's poem submitted. Does this have a title? I don't see one immediately. Save, go here. We're going to make a new note. And I'm going to analyze this short little poem. Okay. Great job on the poem. Thank you, Lola Bear. Oh, you're saying Shooter Daniel. Yes, Shooter Daniel, great job on the poem. It was super good. The Burden Man. It's a bit pretentious, but I like it. Hey, it's okay to be pretentious. Okay. Twitch. Okay. Back to this poem. And of man. And I presume you mean burden spelled like B-U-R-D-E-N, like something heavy, or is that just a chat typo? Great job on the analysis too. Thank you. But yeah, Shooter Daniel, great job on that poem. Yeah, that okay. Burden of Man by, once again, Drowning Devil 12. Drowning Devil 12. Okay. Put this there. This all got kind of bumped. Sorry you have a writing disability? No worries. That's why we ask for clarification. No need to apologize for a simple little misspelling, right? So, trying to get all of this straight. Okay, there we go. In the ruins of Burden of Man. In the ruin of what was once a home, her figure stood tall. Once well known, what was once beauty now laid with decay. Fingered to mouth, a silent display, she will keep quiet. No matter how heavy the chain, a silent reminder that no man is worth this pain. It is not a woman's job to keep him from going insane. I dig it. Okay. In the ruins of what was once a home. For anyone new, the many new people, I think it's important to read the poem over just for like enjoyment, 2 to 3 to 4 times, for just to get the vibe, enjoy it, the feelings, to listen to it, right? Without being analytical. And also Drowning Devil, I guess I ought to ask again, is this a poem you would like to have on the YouTube playlist? And are you fine with critique as well as analysis? In the ruins of what was once a home, her figure stood tall. Once well known, what was once beauty, now laid with decay. Finger to mouth, a silent display, she will keep quiet. No matter how heavy the chain, a silent reminder that no man is worth this pain. It is not a woman's job to keep him from going insane. Of course, to both. Awesome. And one more read. Maybe I'll underline a few things as I go. In the ruins of what was once a home, her figure stood tall, once well known. What was once beauty, now laid with decay, finger to mouth, a silent display, she will keep quiet, no matter how heavy the chain. A silent reminder that no man is worth this pain. It is not a woman's job to keep him from going insane. So, I immediately notice Drowning Devil, since I read your poem last stream when we talked so in depth about the capitalization of these 3-letter I's, that you have an errant capital, which seems to add a lot of weight to this no, and I like that a lot. Errant only in that it's not in a place that it would grammatically normally be, and I think it's pretty cool. So this one is definitely quite a bit more abstract, and I appreciate that as someone who likes to write things that are on the abstract-er side. Obviously, you are telling a sort of grounded story. This home, this woman, the finger on the lips, and the man. But it's much less clear what is going on than in your other poem, which is awesome. Usually whenever I say something like, oh, this poem is less clear than the other one, or this poem is less specific, or this poem uses more repetition or less, those are never value judgments, to be very clear. What a poem is doing, or the way it is written, really has nothing to do with its quality. Mostly because I think all poems are awesome and cool and beautiful in their own right. So you all would be hard pressed to get me to say I just don't like a poem. Or that a poem is bad. In the ruins of what was once a home, her figure stood tall. Once well known, what was once beauty, now laid with decay. Okay. So sometimes it's good with poems like this to add some structure for yourself. So like, what is referring to what? To divide the poem into sort of sub-stanzas. In the ruins of what was once a home, her figure stood tall, once well known. What was once beauty, now laid with decay. Like, I personally, in reading, just when I read, like, once well known, I want to put a pause there. But the next line, what was once beauty, now laid with decay, definitely feels like it can apply to what was once a home, right? Although, something to note is that could be referring to her. Finger to mouth, a silent decay. What was once beauty, now laid with decay, finger to mouth, a silent display. Those rhyme as well, right? And sometimes rhymes tell us what is connected. Decay and display. Sometimes it's just for poetic effect to have these two things rhyme, but sometimes the rhyme is kind of telling us these two things are linked thematically. Something to consider. She will keep quiet, no matter how heavy the chain, a silent reminder that no man is worth this pain. It is not a woman's job to keep him from going insane. What do I want to talk about? In the ruins of what was once a home. So that makes this line sort of like a transition. And we actually talked about this with your poem the other day, and how you did a lot of things that I liked as transitions, where a home can obviously be something laid with decay, like just a decrepit, falling apart home, and that was kind of the immediate connection I made. But then display, rhyming with finger to mouth, can also say that this is referring to the woman. And in your last poem, we talked about transition. Not that I'm trying to reference your previous work too much, because that can be a trap you can fall into when analyzing. But I think that makes this like a cool transition to get from the idea of the home to the idea of the girl, and also in a sense describe them as the same thing. She will keep quiet no matter how heavy the chain. So that's a pretty unique and important word with a lot of meaning as a symbol. And maybe we'll talk about symbols for this poem and what that really means, because I mentioned a bunch of symbols in last night, Shooter Daniels' poem, but I don't think I've really talked about what it means to look at symbols and analyze them. So maybe that'll be like the pseudo lesson for this poem. However, there's an ad break coming up, so do not watch the ad. Take care of yourself. I'm going to go to the bathroom. Don't look at the screen. Don't look at TikTok. Get a snack. Drink some water. Light a candle. Something nice, right? Take care of yourselves. Hello. Anyone who has turbo or whatever who can see me right now. Or I guess who's subscribed. I have subscribers now. Welcome back. I am still Ginny, still known as 2/3 Lotus, everywhere on the internet. And we are going to talk about symbols in poetry. And it's important to know what a symbol is. I think I know what a symbol is. But basically, symbols are kind of like metaphors but different, and metaphors are kind of like symbols but different. And we're going to talk about how they're different and why it matters. There are certain things in like the literary canon, I suppose, that just have meaning baked into them. Did I just get four more ads after watching 4 ads? I hope not. That would be tragic. There was one ad break that got run, so I'm unsure why Twitch would do that to you. But you shouldn't be watching the ads anyway. You should be standing up and taking care of yourself. Symbols and metaphors. So for example, super big because of religion. A cross. That's a symbol that has incredible connotation just by existing in your work. Because this is like referencing like all the Christian stuff that is wrapped up with the cross. A symbol of let's say a door. Just talking about doors, these are an idea of going places and movement and sometimes leaving things behind, moving through, moving forward, right? Just having doors present can be enough to imply the meaning of like movement in your poem, which is slightly different from a metaphor, where I can talk about a metaphor rather than just being a word that already has past connotations in our mind. A metaphor is using a word to kind of describe or relate to something else. So if I wanted to use a camera as a metaphor, let's say I wrote a poem about a camera pointed at me and how a camera pointed at me makes me feel. Obviously very topical as a streamer, but we're not necessarily talking about the camera, we're talking about people watching me. That's a metaphor, right? To use the camera as a way to talk about being observed. It's also kind of a symbol, but they're very, very close to each other. Which is why it's a sort of difficult thing for a lot of people to get, and it's very difficult to sometimes like explain in a class, but symbols are important. So I want to talk about this because there's a few really like notable symbols. Just the idea of a home and then a chain, right? We're not talking about the chain as a metaphor for something else. No matter how heavy the chain, a silent reminder that no man is worth the pain. This is a chain, something pulling us down, and that has symbolic connotation for us to like suss out, right? It's hard because some people might say that's a metaphor in this case, some people might say it's a symbol, but we also haven't really talked about how to analyze metaphors either. So, in the ruins of what was once a home, her figure stood tall, once well known. What was once beauty, now laid with decay, finger to mouth a silent display. She will keep quiet. No matter how heavy the chain, a silent reminder that no man is worth the pain. It is not a woman's job to keep him from going insane. A home is fundamentally a place, like literally as a symbol of safety. And these aren't exactly things that you're like, these are kind of things you're expected to know, in a sense, like what things are symbols for other things, but it's sort of like what's obvious. Like, if we're talking about a home, if we're talking about a chain, they have connotations that exist societally, and we're sort of free to make those connections at our own will. But there are lots of symbols used in literature, and sometimes a lot of symbols that are less evident depending on your own knowledge. Things like the idea of a lamb or a fruit can all reference Christian religion, which some people wouldn't be nearly as aware of. But fruit, Garden of Eden, lamb is another way of talking about like Jesus, all of that. Christianity. And I keep mentioning Christianity because that's where a ton of our literary symbols come from. But a home is a place of safety and care, and it is no longer, right? In the ruins of what was once a home, her figure stood tall. And standing tall is pretty important to me here. Sorry if the dogs are barking kind of loud in the background. Her figure stood tall. She is not beaten down by this broken home, these ruins. She is standing tall, and no matter how heavy the chain, it is not her job. Finger to mouth, she's not talking, she's not engaging with this person, him, who hurt her, because it's not her job. So in a sense, there's some amount of victory in that, but not exactly, because you can say it's not her job, but the fact that we have to say this means that he sort of has this expectation. After all, the title of the poem is Burden of Man. Man, quite literally, a burden on her that does exist. It is real. It is a chain. He is the chain, perhaps. And there's a victory in acknowledging that she is going to stay silent. No matter how heavy the chain, this is not her job to bear the weight to keep him from going insane. I'm actually very surprised that you didn't use bear the weight. It rhymes very well here. I'm not saying you should, I just think it's kind of funny. I certainly would have. In the ruins of what was once a home, her figure stood tall, once well known. There's also maybe a little bit of question, because now we get to talk about tense. It's important to go through for your analysis and figure out what tense is everything in. Stood tall, once well known, maybe says that she no longer is. If there's just past tense saying that someone stood tall, someone was there, someone was happy, it's safe to assume like that's an implication of that they no longer are. So then she would no longer be standing tall. However, it also says she will keep quiet. No matter how heavy the chain, a silent reminder that no man is worth this pain. It is not a woman's job. Right. It is not a woman's job, which makes that tense choice a sort of contradiction. And I'm going to guess in this case that, go back. Okay. And if I had to give critique, if the point is that she is indeed standing tall against the weight, keeping quiet, not complaining, this isn't her job, no man is worth the pain, then maybe this isn't the right word. If we're going purely for victory, we also might not be, because she will keep quiet no matter how heavy the chain, a silent reminder that no man is worth the pain. Worth this pain, specifically. And saying this pain, the pronouns we use are important. This versus the. This pain points towards something specific. This pain, the pain that is right here. The pain refers to a more abstract, perhaps, nebulous the pain. And this, to me, really sounds like the pain is still there. Which maybe then makes sense of why she stood tall. She stood tall, and now there is a heavy chain weighing her down. However, she is silent. She is not going to cry out, because that's validating in a sense to the world. The world tells her she has to bear this, and if she is silent, if she doesn't acknowledge it as pain, then at least she has that to say that she's stronger than it. So that gives a second meaning. Either woman is stronger than the burden of man, or woman has achieved victory over, is above, has superseded the burden of man. Now, as for which of these interpretations this poem is, I'll leave that to each of you, right? I have my own opinion on which one I think it is, probably influenced by my worldview and what I think about, just my own personal experience. That influences how I'm going to read and interpret a poem. So, that's a choice to make. And that's something with specificity. I don't think this poem is specific enough to tell me exactly what it is saying. And that's okay. because she is in a ruined home. And she stood tall, once well known, like she did have strength, and now it's beaten down. But you could also say, well, maybe it's referring to her figure stood tall, and this is recounting a memory of seeing this woman. She stood tall, once well known, what was once beauty now laid with decay. Finger to mouth, a silent display. Now, laid with decay tells me as well that this probably is indeed leaning into the past tense, like non-victorious angle. She is now laid with decay. She and the house. And that's also an important idea. The home is often as a symbol associated with the woman, because of the traditional gender role, unfortunately, of the woman being like the homemaker, the, housewife, all of those words we have, those exist for a reason. And even if those are becoming less true or becoming less accepted, as they should be, probably, those still exist in our symbolism of the home. And that is to say, it is to add a level of maybe victory to this woman. She is the only thing keeping the home together. Even though it is ruined, she is still there, and she's like that last thing, that last piece, holding everything together. Finger to mouth, a silent display. She will keep quiet, no matter how heavy the chain, a silent reminder that no man is worth this pain. It is not a woman's job to keep him from going insane. Because also, that maybe implies, she is the home. She is the home, in a sense. And her job is to keep the home continuing. That sounded kind of bad out of context. Him going insane is not in service to that goal. Or, her keeping him insane doesn't really matter as long as she can keep the home together. It is not her job to keep him sane. It is her job to care for the home. And thus it is the burden of man who comes in and says, who might go insane, who might be, let's say, traditionally, if we're talking about man as a symbol, violent. Many associations with men and violence in just our kind of literary understanding of things. So, she exists as this pillar, standing tall, perhaps, architectural pillar, bearing the weight, keeping the home together. But really, it's not her job to also deal with this. And maybe that's the tragic part of the poem, is that in many cases, woman is expected to support the burden of man. So it's a small victory to say that it's not her job, but she still has to deal with the consequences. So, I like your poems because they're short and they're packed with a lot of meaning. And, in that much, we can have a pretty long discussion about all of this and symbols and what these things mean. Perhaps since you're talking about home, structure, chains, this kind of architectural thing, maybe you could use more symbolism. I like the way that home operates in this poem. I mentioned pillar. I think she feels like a pillar in this poem, especially when you say that she stood tall, right? Still, silent, a pillar. I'm not saying you necessarily need to add that, because I think this poem maybe it's very efficient already in what it's doing. I'd find it hard to take out words. I would find it hard to advise you to add anything if I didn't know exactly what you were trying to say. And maybe you are trying to say that woman is in fact victorious over the burden of man, rather than just strong against it. Maybe. Maybe you're trying to say something entirely different. And of course, it is your prerogative to say, well, do I want to add more specificity? Because it's a short poem, it's fairly abstract. It gives us a lot of room for interpretation. Not a ton once we dig into it. Only a few, maybe possible interpretations from what I see. But you have that choice. Would I rather someone have a more specific understanding at the expense of some of the freedom to interpret? And sometimes, depending on what we're talking about, that is going to interpret or going to influence how specific we want to be. I always say that if I'm talking about something like politics or a strong opinion or morals that I have, I personally would rather be hyper-specific. Because these are the kinds of things that I don't want people to misinterpret about my work. In this case, you maybe toe that line. You're talking about the woman's place in society. You're talking about something more acceptable now than, let's say, 50 years ago. That if you wrote this poem as is, you might have issues. Maybe not 50, 70 years. I don't know. I'm not that old. I think most people can interpret this and see that it's, supportive of the woman. She's in some sense strong, maybe a little victorious, definitely a victim of the burden of man. So I don't feel like you need to be more specific. I don't feel like this can be interpreted as a pro-man poem. Man is the societal gender role in most modern, globalized, capitalized societies. Men are great. Great men are awesome. Cool men are great. All of that. There are lots of men who aren't. There are lots of women who aren't. That's just how it be. But yeah. It's interesting. There's a poem, a very controversial poem from the time of slave era or pre-emancipation America called The White Man's Burden. Maybe some of you have heard about this poem or read it. You could say man's burden as your title. You could say something man's burden. I mean, the burden of man is different than man's burden. But when you put man and burden in the title of a poem, definitely recalls this poem. which is, in a sense, a strong move that you've made. You've flipped it from man's burden to the burden of man, the burden that is man, which is great. You've subverted the title. You know, you could say burden of white man, and then instead of white man's burden, it's a little clunky. But so I think this title is great. I think it's very effective because it talks about the burden of man and points at the issue that is him and his weight and his chain. So in that regard, I like the title a lot, which is normally something that I don't say. I feel like it's really hard to title poems well, and I often find poems not titled very well. But I think this one uses that title, that callback in a great way. So, I think, depending on the meaning, something like the capitalization of stood is great. Or not capitalization, the use of stood versus stands or whatever. Tense is like a choice you could make to change this poem or adjust it. You could add more symbolism of the woman being strong and supportive of the home, if that's what you're trying to say. Things like the pillar. If the home is completely gone, because I feel like, so you associate the woman strongly with the home itself at the beginning, her being decayed, it being decayed. There's a connection there, and there's a connection as a symbol of the home. And sometimes symbols work against you. If you want the home and the woman and the man to be a separate thing, my advice would be maybe to find some way to also separate woman from home. Or you can add more symbolism to say woman is the home. But regardless, I think that the poem is well put together. I think it's efficient. Gotta go now. I'm very glad we rated you. Your passion for poetry is contagious, and I've loved listening to your thoughts. Have a wonderful rest of your time zone. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time, whatever time it is, wherever you're going, whatever you're going to do. Super scree. It's been super awesome to have all of you here from the raid. So, I guess, Drowning Devil, do you have any more questions or things you want me to focus in on? I am sort of intending for this to be a shorter analysis. I am well past my 4 hours of streaming, which is normally when I like to stop, but, the raid gave me a lot of energy, but I can look at a few more things in it if you want, or I can give it one more read and call it good on that poem, and then we can raid out ourselves with more viewers than I've ever raided with. Really makes me nothing I can think of, honestly, just like listening to your thoughts. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you shared. Thank you so much, Drowning Devil. And that being said, here's Burden of Man one more time. In the ruins of what was once a home, her figure stood tall. Once well known, what was once beauty, now laid with decay. Finger to mouth, a silent display, she will keep quiet. No matter how heavy the chain, a silent reminder that no man is worth this pain. It is not a woman's job to keep him from going insane. Burden of Man by drowningdevil12. Thank you so much for sharing. And that will go up on the YouTube. Probably today I'll post Shooter Daniels, did take a little bit to put together. I like added an intro and stuff, and then hopefully I can put yours up tomorrow, and that will be wonderful. And I'm super glad you shared Drowning Devil. Thank you for everyone who has joined in, and I'm gonna give you watching. I encourage you to check out the rest of the series, follow if you enjoyed, and stop by Twitch if you want to share your own work. See you there.